We're out here today, and Mr. Larry Stevenson is going to give us a tour of his orchard. He is growing over 100 varieties of southern variety of apples, and we are going to bring you along and show you what he has in his collection.
You know Felder Rushing?
I don't.
He's a horticulturist. He has a real popular radio show on Mississippi Public Radio. He's well known. He's written about 30 books. He came out here last spring, and he looked around, and he's got like a quarter-acre yard in Jackson. You know?
Wow.
So he said, you know, he grows all that stuff there. He don't have any room, but he looked around when he came out here and said, wow, what a bunch of space you have. You could plant hundreds more stuff. And I realized he was right. Mm-hmm. So I planted about 150 new trees this year. Great. Most of these with the tree protection tubes on it is what I planted. I've decided to cover every inch of my property that I can here in Coldwater with new trees. Because why not? You know, if
Absolutely.
I've got the space, you know, I'm getting older, I've got the space. And I've had so many of these trees that were really just specimen trees. I'd have one or two of this variety, and I've been evaluating them for years. But the evaluating time is over now. You know, these are well tested, so now I'm planting them out for production. So Cawley, Chickasaw, Captain Davis, apples like that, I'm planting multiples. I want half a dozen of each for actual fruit production because the testing time is over.
We actually
for some
had
of these.
2 Yate trees to put in our yard, and I'm going to have more than just one of
That is.
shell. I want shell on seedling because I want a big shell.
Now I've done some shell and other apples. I'm still experimenting a little bit with roots. So I've had shell or others on Antonovka, and had some Bud 9, and I had some Geneva 890, and I also used some inner stems on those stuff. And I planted some on wild native crab apples, Malus augustifolia. So I'm trying them on different stuff. But the thing about that, you have to plant them out, and it takes years to really and truly evaluate them.
Right.
So, and I'll do a few more this year, but you know, I don't want to graft a whole bunch of stuff that's unproven. And I know about how they'll do on seedling. And the stuff you see with a T-post beside it, that's stuff on MM111.
Okay.
So they have to be supported. So that's why I've stopped using MM111. There's Royal Polonia trees, a little grove of them.
We got a bunch of those.
Do you?
Yeah, we're trying to get rid of them because they come up everywhere.
Here's pawpaws, a few little ones, and I'm going to plant some more pawpaws there.
We have a couple of pawpaws, the University of Kentucky type.
Yeah.
They've not fruited for us. They've only been in ground 3 years.
It takes 7 or 8 years. Now here's one that's interesting you might want to take.
This is a stone fruit.
That is. This is the only stone fruit I grow. This is N.C. McKibben. My McKibben ancestors brought that from North Carolina to Mississippi, Bruce, Mississippi, in 1851. And the family has propagated that by sprouts ever since that time. And this particular tree came from limbs in Teoc, Mississippi. It was planted in 1960. And it's not a bush, it's a huge tree. And you look at that thing and it is just perfectly clear of disease and pests. Most stone fruits will have the borers in the trunk, and it'll be black goo oozing out of them. This tree, like I said, is 60 years old now, 62 years old now, and that is perfectly clear. A huge old tree, perfectly clear. And you look at the fruit, see this is already bloomed and setting a little fruit.
I see there's some little ones right there.
It doesn't have any curculio bites, no bug bites on it by the time it's right. So that's it's an approved native plum, what we call a Chickasaw plum.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking the McKibbens, I've heard of it, that McKibbens was a Chickasaw.
That was some of my ancestors. It is a improved native. And apparently my McKibben ancestors thought highly enough out to bring it overland to Mississippi in 1851. So that shows what they thought about it. And I'm sure it's just your regular common Prunus augustifolia selected from the wild, and it was better. And the fruit it's a bright fluorescent red color, almost fluorescent. It's reddish pink.
Do you
it's real
propagate
pretty.
this tree?
I do. I found a few that half a dozen in the high tunnel that's tiny that I didn't sell last year, but I sold out of them. There's an interest in improved varieties of Chickasaw plums. This is a plum that I can actually grow without spraying or any care.
And everybody always raves about the McKibbins and how well it does in this area.
It's just, like I said, it's the only stone fruit I can grow without spraying. I would love to grow peaches and the Asian plums and stuff like that, but I do not know how to without a lot of fungicides and pesticides.
Well, if you've got any of these available, I'll be taking some home today.
I got some small ones. I thought I'd sold out. I got some small ones. I got 50 plum rootstock yesterday, and I have a flat of last year's failed grafts that I can graft NC McKibbin today. You can actually graft something and take some.
Oh, great, great.
Plums are budding out in the greenhouse. So I'm doing plums and mulberries first. Okay.
What is that?
Now this looks like you've got a grafted.
It does. Nearly all my old trees will be multi-grafted, and I don't know. See, I've lost a label. That's the problem with it. Once you lose the labels, it's just a mystery tree, and that's how I keep my collection. I can't afford to have a different tree of every variety.
That's right.
So I'll let it get a little older and graft limbs of different varieties on there. And you can actually see where a lot of these graft unions hasn't merged perfectly, but you see difference in the bark right there.
Yep, like it's smooth right here, then rough right there.
And when they flower and fruit especially, you can see this from a distance, and you can see that graft union. That is probably Leona pear from Duck Hill, judging by the vigor that it's growing.
And it's got pears that are set on it.
Yeah, yeah, it's blooming now. Or it may be pineapple pear if it's got a little pear set. Pineapple is my first bloomer. This particular tree, the main stem of it is Maxine pear, also called Starking Delicious. And the Stark brothers, it is their best pear. And I don't have any doubt that in Missouri, tended by expert horticulturists, it is a really good pear. In Mississippi, it's kind of a loser, and I don't propagate this. It's such a huge, vigorous grower. I have to prune it so much. I have to spend hours pruning off excess wood to keep the vigor down. And it blooms so unusually late. There aren't any other pears blooming at the same time to pollinate it. So that's one I've tried, Maxine pear, and I won't graft anymore. Maybe a few to sell up north of here, but that's unsuitable for me. Now here's a non-astringent Asian persimmon. That is a Giro variety. They're distinctly different than there's an old flower that's dried up. Very distinctly different than the native persimmons. You know, huge advantage to me. I have 3 trees, maybe 8 or 10 years old, 3 trees this size. I probably got 700 or 800 pounds of fruit off of them.
Wow.
Huge. They bear heavy at a young age. So.
Great. I have this in my collection.
Giro is going to be about 90% of what I sell.
What's this, Larry?
Oh, don't know what that tree is. I'm on top where this is. At one time, years ago, I was worried about watering my things, and I had irrigation lines. I actually buried some pipes. I thought I would water these things through some PVC pipes, and some of them are even L-shaped and has an L-shaped thing in it. And I thought I would water these and see that water would go deep down to the roots, and I'd get them really good deep watering. And it wasn't worth the trouble of doing.
Okay.
But there was no reason to take that off. Because trees, the feeder roots are up high near the surface of the ground, and that's really where they need water. And it didn't serve much purpose delivering extra water, and it was a lot of trouble to do water that deep. So that's a failed experiment, you know.
Okay.
This orchard I can give you excellent examples of failures. I tell anybody that comes here.
Anybody that's passionate about growing anything does an experiments, and they see what works, what doesn't.
The failures, observing the failures are tremendously important. You need to know stuff that doesn't work. This is a Hartwell Cook Asian pear, which is a different species than common European pears. Hartwell was the founding member of the Southern Fruit Fellowship, and when he got old, he lost the tags off all his trees, so we just called it after him. He lived in Jackson, Mississippi. But that has great big pears, like that size, 4-inch or 4.5-inch diameter pears.
Wow.
Big round, typically Asian pears, you know, with crisp texture. They look like coconuts or cantaloupes hanging off the trees.
Wow.
And it has a distinctive flavor different flavor than most of the Asian pears. You know, they have that flavor. It's equally as good, but it's different. And you take a bite out of that, and you know it's different than something like a Hosui or 20th Century.
Okay.
So that is one of the few Asian pears that I grow that are resistant enough to fire blight to keep growing.
Great.
Here's a tree. This is a heart nut.
This is interesting.
This is a heart nut. You can see the graft union down there.
Yep.
It's probably grafted onto black walnut.
Look at these.
And they're setting flowers now.
Yeah.
Heart nut, they say, heart nut is a type of Japanese walnut. It's very similar to black walnut, but they say don't pollinate with black walnut. It needs to be pollinated with other types of trees. But that's the only one I have, and somehow it's getting pollen, and there's nothing else but black walnut to pollinate it, and it's setting fruit. Heart nut actually does pretty well in Mississippi.
How many chill hours does this require? Because I want to know if I can grow this down where I'm at.
If you actually research it much, you'll find out they are fussy. You'll read that they're suited for a small area of zone 5 only in the Midwest for actual production.
Huh.
But I'm growing them in upper part of zone 8, and I'm getting nuts off these at a pretty young age. So I don't know what
this tree. This is pretty fascinating how this tree is spread out.
Yeah, that might be going on 12 or 15 years old. I am not sure if this growth is characteristic of them. I think maybe the top died out at one time and it's bifurcated like that, and then all the limbs come out and they're bifurcated like that. So I'm not sure it's characteristic of the growth, but this specimen here is interesting. And I like being able to see the graft union on there.
Yeah.
Now I would like to graft a lot of these. I would graft it onto black walnut. Here's a problem. This is characteristic. It has real thick, robust
sure does.
New growth on there. So I would have to grow a black walnut seedling to get it pretty similar diameter to that.
At least 2-year-old
Several
seedling.
years old, I'd have to grow out the black. So that kind of slows me down. But I would like to propagate it because this is a good bearing tree. Has little heart-shaped nuts, about an inch and a half in diameter. Easy to crack. They taste like Brazil nuts.
Wow.
But it's mine does. It's not supposed to, but mine does well here.
That's very interesting. All right.
These trees, I have most of mine are examples of how not to prune a tree. This is a Hawaii apple from California, 1950s, which I think will do well. This one is actually pruned approximately right. I've done a lot of work pruning and training these young trees. It's kind of a central leader, but it's spread out a little bit. And these limbs, I spread them apart. Here's a shell apple. Shelled Alabama.
And look at it, it's already starting to bud.
This year it's blooming early. Now,
yeah,
most years it's not. I had a little disease pressure on it last year, and I pruned it pretty hard. I pruned it hard for signwood, so I can propagate more.
How many shell are you growing? Just this one?
This is the only older one I have, but I've planted 4 or 5 other new ones. And you can see here, this is land I've been clearing a little bit at a time. There's a towel. Clearing a little bit at a time, and this is my new stuff.
Great.
Tiny little trees. Normally, I put these kind of fences, or this type, I put these kind of fences around everything for deer.
Yeah.
Deer don't like apple or pear leaves very much. It's a low preference for them. They will eat them just out of spite. So I'll literally put a 5 or 6 foot tall fence around each one of my trees. So I'm fencing them from deer primarily.
I just saw a deer track in your driveway.
They're everywhere. Deer's in sight right now. They're watching us as we speak. But this year, the voles and rabbits are eating my trees. They're literally following behind me and girdling the bark on these young trees as I plant them. So I have invested, I bought a big case of these Rigid brand tree tubes. They need to be protected from the deer, but the voles and rabbits are destroying my trees. They're eating the bark off of them.
Wow.
As fast as I can. So I've rushed to get those things. I'm liking those a lot. And I'm hoping a deer or a vole or rabbit won't gnaw through these things. I don't think they will.
I think you've got them defeated with that.
Yeah, and you need one at least this tall. And as soon as it gets up over this tube, deer will start nipping the leaves. I have a bunch of these wire fences, and I move them around from tree to tree as they get older and a little bit out of a deer's range. I move them back and forth. But I've got all these. I planted 150 new trees this year.
Wow, that's great.
And I'm trying harder to keep them tagged and everything. I have a few fences laying around. But these are younger trees, and these are multiples, like several Collies, several Captain Davis, Chickasaw, Floyd, Richmonds. These are mostly apples.
So these are already copies of what you're already growing?
Yeah, same thing that I'm selling. I sell my pretty looking trees to my customers. I save the runts for myself, but these are little runny ones that I had left that I haven't sold. So I'm planting them for myself, and they will probably do. But they need protection from deer. Now I have heavy deer browsing. And this area gets a lot of the eastern sun, which we kind of value. The theory is the morning sun, the eastern sun, will dry up the dew faster. So when the leaf is wet, there's more chance that it'll have disease and spread. So it's supposedly the eastern sun is more valuable. It dries them up faster, the dew off faster. Some of them are, that's a Cox Winter tree. Cox Winter is probably a pollinator for Anna. And I grow, that's a Grimes Golden. You shouldn't do this. Take the tree off and let it move, but I got tags growing out of my trees all the time.
It's because where you tagged it and then the tree girdled itself around the...
Yeah, you can see it from the front. That's a Grimes Golden. That's a parent of many a good commercial apple. The parent of, one of the parents of Yellow Delicious and a lot of others.
I've heard really good things about Grimes Golden.
It is, that one hasn't born yet, so I'm uncertain how many chill hours it really needs. But Grimes Golden, they're still using Grimes Golden in breeding programs today. It's one of the main ones they breed from. It's a parent of so many good apples. That Cox Winter, you know, that's one I want to sell mostly south of Jackson, Mississippi, but the apples I eat are grown in Fulton, Mississippi. In August, almost up to the Tennessee state line. So they obviously are tough enough. It's blooming some now. They're obviously tough enough to do considerably farther north of here.
I got some Cox Winter Scion wood from you this year, but you really didn't offer it for sale.
I didn't have much. I let Cox Winter and Anna, they start blooming so easy. I couldn't get much of it before it was already budded. And I've got a little, just half a dozen pieces of Cox Winter and apple, and it was already budding, and I had to pluck the leaf off. So it's not really prime sign wood. I just have trouble getting to the stuff soon enough. Even though I start pruning in January, it's hard to get to them soon enough before they start budding out.
Look at this.
And that'll work. I've used a lot of sign wood with buds on it, but you'd rather have dormant wood. This set apples already.
Yep.
Apple and pear blossoms and small fruit aren't real cold sensitive. I seldom have a year when I blame the fruit loss from late frost. They will tolerate.
It's really got to dip into the 20s to damage your fruit.
Whereas peaches or cherries or any of the stone fruit, they are sensitive. That's why I would never grow them commercially. All my peach growing friends, they get out of the business because they lose the peaches from late frost, which I don't have the trouble with apple and pear. They'll stand a lot of cold. Here's a shell apple planted on native crab apple, Malus augustifolia.
Have you
that's 1 year's growth.
What's your experience between growing on crab apple and growing on seedling and growing on colonial stocks?
Well, I'm using mostly seedling apple right now, which will make a full-size tree. And you'll have to, I keep them restrained to 10 or 12 feet tall at the most by just pruning, which apples grow at a good pace in this climate. They don't overgrow like pears are, so I don't have much to. I use that seedling rootstock for the anchorage because I've used a lot of MM111 and a lot of clonal rootstock. A dwarfing rootstock, by definition, is a weaker rootstock. So when my stuff on MM111 and all other dwarf stock, when it gets 5 or 6 years old and top heavy, they fall over.
Yes, so I had that experience. I actually had, Smith, Mississippi, and we had a little hurricane come through. It got 60 miles an hour, and my whole apple tree had fallen over.
That's hard on anything.
I decided that I was going to go with some seedling. I ordered some seedling so that we get that long anchoring taproot that goes way down.
That's why I'm doing them, and then keep them restrained by pruning. Now, I would love, people ask me literally every day, what's a good dwarf rootstock for apples? in the Southeast, and there's no answer for that.
Right.
I'm dissatisfied with every one I've tried, but I'm still experimenting a little bit. You know, I wish I had a good answer. Which is no big deal to drive a T-post and make a permanent stake beside the thing to support it. You know, you can. It's not such a big deal.
And there are some people that will do interstem, so they'll put a dwarfing interstem right on top of the seedling, and then put their variety on top of that, and that'll create some dwarfing.
I did a good many last year. I got Bud 9 and Geneva 890 tops that my friends cut off. They were using them as rootstock. I cut those off and made interstems on a lot of them. And this is a different one. Malus augustifolia is the native crabapple that's native to this region. I don't see them in the wild around here, but people in South Mississippi do. And it has a reputation of being a smaller dwarfed tree, more like a bush, and they tolerate wet soil. So that has some potential as rootstock. Although I'm doing that, and now I'm hearing, I ain't the first one to do that. As early as the early 1800s, people were doing that. Some of the first settlers in the country grafted onto the native crab apples. And it seems like what I hear is that it actually changes the flavor of the fruit.
I've heard that.
It's not as good, it decreases the quality of the fruit. So I've done a good many of them on that, and I'm still trying them, I'll evaluate them. Malus augustifolia don't like to live in a pot. The ones I've had is fussy. So I don't think that'll be an answer. But I got this growth. That's 1 year's growth there. So that particular tree did well.
And that grew all the way from down low up to here. Yeah, it was a 4-inch little tree. So that's good growth. I don't typically get that, but I'm still experimenting. Geneva people, my more northern friends are really, really bragging about Geneva 890. And that kind of, the unusual clonal rootstock, you got to order that stuff early, and I'm sold out of it. Everybody's sold out. But I will try to get some last year, and it has potential. It just takes so long, literally, until it starts bearing at least 4, 5, or 6 years. I have to let it grow and study the growth habit and see if it's solidly anchored and see how the production is. It takes a long time to evaluate something new. And so I'm doing that, but to this date, I do not have a good dwarf rootstock for apples in the Southeast. Interstem would be your next selection.
Interstem is my next thing, which interstem is not hard to do.
So do you
I'm doing more
graft
and more
the interstem onto your rootstock and grow that out, or do you immediately?
I do it all at once, and that works better than you think. So I'm making a cut on my rootstock and grafting it needs to be at least 8 or 9 inches long to have much effect. And I immediately graft my desired variety on top of that all at once. And they usually take and grow with no problem.
Great, great.
You could grow them an extra year. I just don't see the need for it. Here's another Asian persimmon. Like I said, it had several 100 pounds of fruit. And starting to bud a little bit, unusually early.
I have a Sago. My Sago already has fruit on it.
Well, you're so far to the south.
I am. I'm 5 hours south of you.
That is a Cornelian cherry. I don't think they're suitable for here. I had several. I think it wants a colder climate. I had several, but I think that particular one doesn't have a pollinator now.
That's in the dogwood family.
Cornelian cherry is a European type of dogwood. They use it a lot for the wood. If you need a spear shaft or a chariot axle, a Cornelian cherry is a good wood for you to use. I'm thinking this is too far south for it to really thrive. I've had berries, I've had it fruit some years. It is really, really astringent. If you put enough sugar on there, yeah, it's refreshing. It cleanses your mouth. It's a refreshing taste fruit. That's what the Greeks and other Southern European made sherbet out of, and people in the Mideast. What they call sherbet was mostly from Cornelian cherry juice mixed with ice or snow. Right. But I'm not going to grow anymore.
So is this where you have most of your pear? Is this pear I'm
This
seeing?
is a lot of pear, yeah, more pears. And you see that's the Orient pear blooming. Orient is a little bit better quality than the old hard cannon Kiefer pears.
Yeah.
And that one is even more resistant to fire blight. That is dead tough against fire blight. And that is well tested. I used to have a lot of susceptible Asian pears all around, which eventually were wiped out by fire blight. The European pears, they'll get a little dose of fire blight, it nearly always enters through the blossom, and they'll kind of compartmentalize it, and you'll see the tips of the branches die. Whereas the Asian pears, most of them will get it and will go straight down the limb and into the trunk and actually kill the trees. So European pears handle the fire blight. Fire blight is a bottom line for apples and pears in this climate. If it's very susceptible, you just can't grow them.
Right.
And I've just
I had a
dismissed those
bad
varieties.
bout of fire blight last year.
I haven't had a really bad infestation in several years. Now, there's a few muscadines, and they produce good. And I was going to put another muscadine trellis here, but I'm kind of collecting a bunch of mulberries. I love mulberries so much. I got a bunch of Ukrainian and other rare varieties, and this is my new mulberry collection. I might have a row of them. That's a Queen Luscious. I think that's from Ukraine. So I have a bunch of new mulberries I'm trying out. And mulberries, deer will hit those first. They love mulberry foliage, so they will really hit those.
It's actually a fodder crop for a lot of
livestock. It is a fodder for sheep and goats, but deer, they look for mulberry leaves.
Now, on a sidebar conversation, I have about 50 red mulberry. What are you grafting onto it that's working out?
Mulberry is easy, any other kind of mulberry. And I have grafted, I buy whichever is cheap, white mulberry or red mulberry, whatever is cheap, and I grafted on those alternately. This year they're all red ones, red seedling. But Illinois Everbearing and Grover's Best are the two I'll do. I think I'll show you in the high tunnel. I've already grafted my rare mulberry signs. It was the first thing I grafted, my Ukrainian ones. But I'm looking for more mulberry varieties. Poke that back in, deer, nip that off. Deer don't, there's a lot of stuff like pears they don't particularly like, but they'll eat it just out of spite, and they'll eat literally any kind of new growth. I'm liking these rigid tree tubes, but now that is a disadvantage. But here is here's a goumi.
Wow,
G-O-U-M-I.
big.
That probably needs a lot of thinning out. Goumi's a species of Elaeagnus. It's a lot of ornamental Elaeagnus. But goumi makes a berry pretty early in the year, like in April. So it's about 1 inch long, brilliant, bright colored red with silver speckles, and it is gorgeous. And it'll be leafed at the same time, so it looks very Christmassy. The dark green leaves and the red and silver speckle berries are beautiful.
I have a couple of these I'm putting in my orchard also.
I have not ever sprouted a goumi seed, and I've not gotten any of them to root. I need to learn how to propagate goumi. Now that bush is probably 20 years old, and I've done only a little pruning on it. It could use a lot of thinning out right now, but that is a discreetly growing bush. It produces fruit. I'd highly recommend these planting in your yard for no care fruit producing. And one advantage of planting a real exotic like that, the animals did not recognize that as food for about the first 10 years I could get my goumis. But once the birds found out they were edible, they tear them up, and I haven't gotten any goumi fruit the last few years.
So you plant this as a distraction crop from all your other...
Well, it's nothing's going to distract the birds from figs and mulberries. They're going to hit those. And a lot of these old European pears, this is a problem. It took me an hour to top that and prune it, the limbs off this year. And I've got some old trees that weren't pruned and trained right from the start, and some of them I'm just abandoning. You know, I'll get fruit, it's way up high, they're literally more trouble than they're worth to maintain the things. Every pruning cut you make in the winter, the tree responds to it like it's an injury, and it'll throw out 2 sprouts where you cut off one. So
at a minimum.
It's a never-ending cycle of restraining the growth on these old European pears. And I'd rather, I'm replanting younger trees, and I'll keep the limbs trained from the start.
So this is Magnus?
Well, essentially, but this is probably, you see most of them are top worked.
Yep.
That's probably Leona. Top work most of them with Leona. Okay. That bottom part is supposed to be Magnus, and then here's a Fred's Golden Delicious. I haven't had fruit from that, but you know, a lot of them are multi-grafted. I had I've only ever deliberately brought one Ayers pear. That's an old pear from Tennessee, But I have a couple dozen in my orchard. About 10 years ago, some nursery business decided to graft about 1 million Ayers pears, and then they stuck whatever label they wanted on there. So I have a lot of trees I bought under other names that turned out to be Ayers. And Ayers is okay pear, but I don't need 20 of them. So that's what these older European pears here are. They were Ayers, and now they're top work to something else. Here's a tag. That was blooming. Well, there's a Florida home. And there's a teardrop. That's old Mississippi variety from South Mississippi. Right. But they're multi-grafted. This is, I think that was an Ayers stem originally. Lost some tags on so much. It's a disaster when you lose a tag.
It is.
Now here is a, that's a persimmon, Asian, well, this is a native persimmon rootstock. That's what I use as a rootstock from Asian persimmons. And that's grown, and I grafted that, and that failed last year, or the year before last, so I grafted it again. And you see, I did a bark graft for a big solid stem like this. I usually use a bark graft, and I grafted one to each side. You can still see some of the covering, but this was just a bark insert around the bark on each side. And this is Asian persimmon right here growing out of the native persimmon rootstock. And this is just 1 year's growth, so that's pretty good.
That's pretty good for a pear. I mean, for a persimmon. Yep.
So persimmons are normally slow growers.
So is this pretty much your pear orchard? Is this
most of them. I'm trying harder now than ever to concentrate my pears up here.
Well, this is loaded, whatever that is.
That is, let's see, supposed to be a Warren pear. That was planted in 2000. Supposed to be a Warren pear. Warren pear is from Hattiesburg. It is supposedly a seedling of Magnus pear. But I have Warren pear from 3 or 4 different sources, and none of them match the picture I see of what Warren pear is supposed to be. So I am uncertain if it's a Warren pear. Actually, that particular tree, pretty sure it's a Bosc pear, which shouldn't do good here, but actually does pretty well. Bosc is one I would not recommend, but there you go, with my trees producing. Because it's got that, just like the one you see at the grocery store. It's brown and rusted and got the thin neck. It looks like Bosc. So,
and this one has fruited for you?
Yeah, yeah.
I have Warren.
Pretty well.
And Warren's about 5 years old in my orchard, and it's never as much as flowered. I'm about ready to
I have another
it.
Warren up here, same thing, that's probably 10 years old and has not flowered. So
I'm about ready to top work it.
Yeah, I am too, but I wish I definitely had Warren. Did you send me some Southern Bartlett?
I did.
I think I've got that package here. I value that a lot, and that's one I want to propagate a lot. Now that is a...
that's a beautiful shaped pear tree.
That is Asian
Look
pear.
at
That is what I call a Sweet Cheeks pear. A friend named it Sweet Cheeks. Some years, but not always, it has 3 distinct longitudinal striations that divide it into 3 lobes, which is weird as it can be. I've never seen that anywhere, and I cannot imagine for life why it does that and why it does it more defined some years than others.
The fruit will have 3 lobes?
3 different lobes. It's a real odd shape, but some, not every year. Some years would be very faint lines and other years distinct lobes. So why would it do that? And why 3 lines? It has 5 carpels. Why wouldn't it be 5 divisions? But anyway, I bought that as some other, I think I wanted a hood pear. I think that's what I ordered from a supposedly reputable nursery. It took me several years to realize, well, that ain't a hood pear. It's not even a European pear at all. It's Asian. It's distinctly Asian. Has those dark colored leaves. And it has Asian growth habit where it's spread out. Whereas the European pears want to try to grow straight up vertically. The Asian pears, that's the advantage of them. They grow more spread out. That's big, it's too big, but I haven't really pruned or trained that at all. That's just natural growth.
Yeah, but seeing how that you haven't trained it, I think it's absolutely beautiful.
It is big, and the pears are the same quality as Hosui or 20th century pears, which is excellent. They're just like picking candy bars off the tree, real high bricks level.
I bet you get a ton of pears off that one. It's
a good many, yeah, good many. Now, some of them are getting too high for me to easily pick.
Sure.
But that is one that I'll propagate a lot. The Sweet Cheeks Asian pear, and that one would be one that's unique to me. It probably has a name, and with those distinctive striations on the fruit, you would think it would be easy to identify, but I have not matched it yet. Here's a Lang Jujube. That's a Lang, that is a Lee.
Okay.
And they produce good fruit. I like them a lot. They have for a long time.
I like them too. Michelle doesn't like them.
Jujube, I'm trying to introduce jujube to the southeast. They still hang on the tree. Now I tell you what, if you get jujube, the leaves are some of the biggest, and they'll be like hen egg size. Most of them are smaller, like that little lang. They have like a mild, jujubes taste like a little dry apple with maybe a little bit of licorice aftertaste, just a little bit.
A little sweetness.
A little sweetness. They're not terribly sweet. They are not usually very impressive when they're picked fresh. But I tell you what, if you got for years, my lead jujube, I described them as apple-flavored styrofoam, which nobody wants that. But I have learned, lead jujubes like to ripen off in a dry spell. So if it's not too much rain in July and August, they are pretty good. And the fruit off a mature tree is better. And if you think a jujube is bland, pick them, put them in the freezer for a month, and then defrost them. Freezing will change their taste and texture completely. When they come out of the freezer, they'll be softer and sweeter, and they actually do taste like dates. They call them Chinese dates. After being frozen, they're delicious.
I'll try that this
year.
So
if you got bland jujubes like Lee kind of tend to be, freeze them and take them out, and you'll be amazed what they taste like then. Jujubes, like a lot of other fruit, the better the fruit, the thornier the tree is. So that one's, by jujube standards, that's not terribly thorny, but they will sticky. Jujube has a lot of potential. Jujube is one of the most commonly eaten fruits in the world. Everybody in the world gobbles them down. They just never made it much in North America.
It's because we got better fruit to eat.
Maybe, maybe.
Than apple-flavored styrofoam.
Yeah. I've had some lead jujubes that ripened off in a dry spell that were pretty darn good. That is pears, top work, various ones. I spent a lot of time pruning an old tree like that. You know, like I said, they're high up, so they're big hassle to prune. And you see like this would be ayers. You can see the graft union. And that's the other side. You see the graft union, that was be a bark graft. And then you see the graft, that's pretty sure that's Leona growing upwards from there. Now think about that, the hassle about it. I actually get a harvest of signwood off the trees. That's actually a valuable product. I cut these signwood. So if I've got these multi-work trees with different varieties growing on there, I have to be really, really watch when I'm pruning things in it to get the variety that I'm wanting and not some oddball thing that I've grafted on there. But that's how we keep our collections, you know, multi-grafted trees.
My very first pear tree I put in my orchard, I put 7 varieties on that one tree because we were only working in a little small area. I couldn't have a tree for every variety.
Yeah, that's the same thing here. I used to do a lot of that, and a lot of these multi-work things. That's a pineapple pear bloom. It's already bloomed and set fruit now. I mean, set leaves now. But pineapple is a really early blooming pear. But I get fruit off pretty high up in North Mississippi. But I used to do more of that. I'm doing less and less now because once you lose those tags, you done messed up. And it's so hard to keep a permanent tag on things. And I'm propagating from them, so I'm doing more on a single stem. Now here's one I didn't really prune well this winter. That is a Potomac pear. Potomac's a really good quality pear. And I get good fruit off it. But you see all those water sprouts growing up all through there?
Yeah.
That is typical growth that you get off older European pears. All this stuff growing up, that's what you prune off every winter.
It wants to grow straight up.
And prune it off all during the year. You do a lot of summer pruning. The proper way to do this would come by and just pull them off with your finger and not even have to cut them while they're very young. But it takes so much to keep up with a tree like that. European pears grow so vigorously. That's, you know, it'll take years for that to fruit. All that growth right there is doing is clogging up the tree, keeping the light and the air from getting in there. So you don't want that. But this is one of my older pears. It's so much trouble. It takes so many hours to prune one of those.
Would you use any of that?
I've just about abandoned it, huh?
Would you use any of that for
that is signwood now. That's
so.
plenty of sign, but I get ample signwood even without the. I use water sprouts as signwood. See, that's exactly what you want to cut for signs to propagate another tree. But that is a problem if you let your older European pears overgrow.
Would you say that the water sprouts probably have so much energy stored up in that whenever you graft that onto a rootstock, it's ready to go?
Mine do. Now, pears and apples, you know, they're not real hard to grow anyway.
Yeah.
I've had some experienced growers tell me only use wood growing out of the barren horizontal limbs.
Right.
For whatever reasons, I don't know. Like this would be a good sign for them why they would not use a water sprout. But I've always used water sprouts like that because it's straight and smooth and easy to cut and work with. They do fruit as fast as the horizontal signs. I think these are some mayhaws right here to our right.
Wow, yeah, starting to bloom.
One of them, I may have a raisin tree here somewhere. These are mostly mayhaws. Mayhaws are diseasy.
This is
they
already bloomed.
You'll find them in South Mississippi and Louisiana, and there's an industry for them and actual demand for them. They get fungal diseases. They get rust diseases. So, and I'm told they get the same rust diseases even in South Louisiana. So it's so much. Whereas I'll get on my pears, I get some little rust fungus on the fruit and it'll shrivel them up. But I get the same thing, same type of rust fungus on my mayhaws, and it actually sets into the bark and kills a lot of the wood. So I'm not going to try to do many more mayhaws. And look, that's flowered and look like it's set, that's some mighty little fruit. Yep. So I'll get a few mayhaws this year. It's the first time it's set a lot of fruit.
Oh, is this an improved variety that you don't have to plant down in swampy water?
Well, I don't even remember. I'm growing them on red clay hills, pretty dry, you know.
Yeah.
So
typically
obviously,
a wild mayhaw will grow along riverbanks.
That's the environment they like, and there'll probably be less disease pressure and grown in a better environment. But I think it was a label improved variety, probably one T.O. Warren, the one that discovered the Warren tree. He bred a bunch of mayhaws, and I think that's one of his. But I've lost the label, so. Mayhaws, you don't really eat the fruit fresh. You use a juice to make jelly and stuff.
Some of the world's best jelly comes from
the best
mayhaw.
jelly. Everybody brags about mayhaw jelly, which I don't do much juicing and making jelly, stuff like that. I could, but.
So you basically just have for your apples, your new orchard over there, and most of your apples are probably planted back here?
Well, the new ones and a few scattered there, yeah. These in that row right in front of the house, those are 7 or 8 years old. Those are mostly Appalachian type apples, and some Mississippi ones mixed in. Yeah, for my serious apple orchard, it'll be that new area down there for real production. But all over, and I mix them up, because at first when I first started planting, I didn't understand why you need to plant them in a straight line or anything, so I just planted them wherever I had a spot. And I've cleared this gradually over 30 or 40 years, you know. A little bit at a time, foot at a time. I cleared a little bit of land from the edges every year. So
how many
I've been
acres?
planting them about, that's a luxury. I've never had like a whole acre a place where I could just plant new stuff. And
so you cleared that just for those new apples?
Yeah.
Great.
Apples, I didn't even have a definite goal in mind, but I'm doing a lot more apples. I want more production off apples. I want some serious production fruit I can show. And see, that's one on MM111, and most of them I put T-posts beside. But it fell, and you can stand them back up.
Yeah, I stood mine back up.
Prop them back up.
It eventually just gave up.
Here's another persimmon. Native persimmon below here, and then the Asian persimmon on top. And you can look at that, you can see that was actual bark inset. And this shows you how a bark inset,
Come in close on that.
it takes a while to heal, but that's a good picture of it healing in that area. That's a 1-year-old growth, and it's healed and grown them. And you can see, I cut that off flat horizontally, the rootstock, and it's grown over that. And you see that little thing below that? That'll be native.
Yep, that'll be a native stem.
But that's good growth.
Yep.
A bark graft looks crude and rough, and you think it never healed up, but this is how it's healed up over here. And another year, at the end of this year, that'll be grown completely over, and you won't even be able to see more of a graft union.
Okay. So what apples do you have here?
A lot of Appalachian types, a few Mississippi ones in here too. I've done a little bit of pruning and training on these, and these are approximately what you want to get. You know, I actually physically bent these limbs out and held them down, and keeping them pruned to where they're not a straight vertical tree. They actually spread out a little bit, and this is kind of what you want for best fruit production. And if you start off pruning and training when they're young, you can. It's a lot easier. And these are right. They should fruit soon. They've been fruiting the last year or two. So way better to start off with a tree when it's young, pruning and training. Once they get out of hand, it's hard to correct mistakes. Here's one I like a lot. This is a Smith seedling of Mississippi from the Ludlow, Lena area of Mississippi, south of Jackson. I like that. Smith seedling is what I will grow. It'll be a low chill apple. That is what I grow for people that like that sour apple taste. But it's, and a lot of people do, but it is sweet at the same time. It tastes like a Jolly Rancher apple candy, just like that. So sweet and sour. So I grow those just for people that want a sour apple.
This was the very first apple that I bought from my orchard, was the Smith
seedling. Yeah. I like it a lot. And I'm, you know, 100 miles north of where it originated, but I'm liking it. I just got production a couple of years ago, but I like it. It's a pretty little fruit. I'm delighted with it. I like sweet apples myself, but even I like the Smith seedling in Mississippi. So that's a good local native heirloom apple, you know, with a good flavor. It's producing without being sprayed. Yep. Fire ants, I got a bunch of bait in the truck I need to dump over there. I mulched a lot of these things. Fire ants love to mulch, and they love to build nests in my pots.
Yep. I'm dealing with fire ants in my orchard right now. Everything I planted out has got a fire ant bed.
Everything. Right, and I'm finding more and more. They love my high tunnel. That's perfect.
What do you treat them with?
Any kind of bait or stuff that you sprinkle on there.
Because you really aren't eating the apples, you're just growing the apples for most
Well, I eat them, yeah. What I do pick, I usually don't get around to picking many of them. But what I do pick and find the time to pick, yeah, I eat them and give them away to friends and show them off at sales. You know, I need to display some fruit at any sale to actually prove what I got. But now the fire ants, I'll tell you what, they do not actually eat the fruit.
Right.
If a fruit gets a little split in it, like a bird peck or something, and it throws out some juice, the native red and black ants hit that. I do not see the fire ants doing it. And I have so many fire ants, I actually wonder if they have a beneficial effect on the tree. I'm wondering if that big fire ant nest, if they regard that whole tree as their territory, and maybe they are keeping it clean of pests and kill other bad pests.
That's a whole different idea that we probably need to
I'm wondering about that, and that's what I see, because I have not sprayed this apple with any pesticides ever, and I'm getting pretty good fruit and don't have many disease problems. So I'm wondering if they have like a symbiotic relationship with them. On the other hand, you see that nest, it'd be like 6 or 8 feet underground that they've hollowed out and have all the little tunnels. So they're not killing the tree, they're not hurting the roots, but it's not as solidly anchored when you got all that honeycomb of empty spaces in there. And I've had friends that talk about the trees falling over because there was a huge fire ant nest under it. That one's staked, so.
You might have to look into the benefits of having an ant bed around you.
I wondered about that. I'd like to know if somebody researched that. And I've talked to a couple other entomologists, and they kind of wondering the same thing. Because fire ants don't actually cause trouble in my trees. Now see this, I had this tied up, and I took to let that
girdle.
I had a big band and let that grow in there too long. That's a Buckingham old Appalachian apple.
Right. And you see these cross braces he's got pulled in here to pull those tree limbs down.
Those are my limb spreaders.
Yeah.
And you can buy these plastic or metal. If you leave them in there, they will grow into the tree. But this is what I use to, when I say training my trees, I meant this. I used to have access to a lot of the scrap metal. This is aluminum, and I poured little teeth in there, ground them in there. Far better than anything I bought. Every metal or plastic one I've ever bought was not nearly as sturdy as this.
They slip out of there, huh?
I used to sell them. These little 2 things will sell. Don't do them this time of year. Do them when they're actively growing. The limbs are brittle while they're doing them. But I actually jam those into the crotch angle and literally, physically spread them apart. You can hang weights on them or do really whatever it takes, you know. But that's how what I say training them. I actually mean and getting those limbs to a more horizontal position. And I've definitely proved it with my apples and pears. If you let them grow untrained, the pears are more than apples. They'll try to grow straight up vertically, and it'll take them years to bear.
Mm-hmm.
If you spread those limbs down to a more horizontal angle, what you do is you kind of fool the fruit tree. The fruit tree senses that as it's being the limbs, when they're more horizontally bent down, they think the limbs are heavy with fruit, and then they'll go ahead and set fruit buds for the next year too.
The vertical limbs have an auxin that wants to keep growing up.
It's
and
a
then
chemical signal.
When you lay them down, that's a different auxin that causes fruit set.
It's an actual chemical signal, and I've definitely proved that, especially with pears, European pears that want to be vertical. I've proven they will start bearing faster.
Just lay the limbs down.
Lay them down more horizontal, and they don't have to be horizontal, but like at a 45 or anything better than growing straight up.
Yeah.
But that European pears, more than anything else, will benefit from some training. And I've actually done not too bad a job for these. And I've left these in here too long, and they're growing into the bark, but I can pull them out. What is that?
This is Virginia Gold.
Virginia Gold. That's a good Appalachian apple that produces in Mississippi. A lot of good apples from Virginia. Here is a, let's see, let's walk over here.
Let's talk about this Anna since we got this one in perfect view right here.
Okay.
Look at this Anna, how big, it's already filled out. It's got fruit set on it. Anna is one that we can grow down where we live along the Gulf Coast. And this is what you find in our big box stores and our nurseries. This is what they're selling for zone 8B down where we live. And you can tell even up here where he's at 5 hours north of us, Anna does wonderful.
Let's walk over here. Here's some mulberries. That right there and that right there are Illinois Everbearing mulberries.
That's probably one of my favorite varieties.
I have never tasted one better than Illinois, because a lot of you wild mulberries, they're sweet, but they're kind of bland. They don't have much depth of flavor. But Illinois Everbearing, when they're ripe, that's like a fine wine, you know. Not many of those make it home. They are absolutely delicious. They are not bland. Now, Illinois Everbearing is unusually late bearing mulberries.
It is.
They start, I got one from Carrollton I call Grover's Best, and it starts about normal fruiting time, about the first part of April, and it will bear for about 6 weeks. And when the Grover's Best starts playing out, the Illinois Everbearing will just start about mid-May.
Now, I have Shangri-La, and I'm eating Shangri-La right now.
I've heard other people do. Well, I'll tell you what.
And then Illinois Everbearing hadn't even started leafing out yet.
No.
So like you said, as one finishes up, Illinois Everbearing's so late that you can get a good.
But I will say now, Shangri-La and other mulberries that come out of Florida I'm a little bit wary of those because they can be cold sensitive.
Mine have always been cold sensitive. Last year I didn't get a mulberry off of it because we had a late freeze that got them off.
I had Shangri-La, some good sized ones in pots and all, and I definitely saw a difference in the fall. They were more cold sensitive. And the Pakistan Red, I tried to grow them outside in the ground for several years. Pakistan Red is more cold sensitive than a fig.
Really?
It is really good. So that's one I would only sell along the Gulf Coast, so I won't try to propagate any more of those. Pakistan Red makes some mulberries long and thick as your finger, great big ones, one of the huge ones. But all mine, when I did get it to fruit and survived the late frost, they fell off in the green or red state, and I never got them to ripen properly. So that was the one I just gave up on. Not suitable for this climate. But you see the mulberry, I cut these back real heavily. Mulberries, I believe mulberries bear mostly a little bit on last year's wood, but a whole lot on the current year's wood.
Yeah.
So like most berries. So I pruned that back pretty severely to control the size, but it'll throw out, they're very vigorous growing, but it'll throw out a bunch of new growth, and it should fruit this year too. So actually by pruning it hard, you should get more fruit production.
We're gonna prune ours back hard this year too.
I did really, last couple of years I couldn't tell much difference in production.
What is this one? Arkansas
That
Black?
is Arkansas Black, probably 10 years old or more, hasn't fruited. And I keep cutting it back, and I see a bunch of disease on it. I don't know what that black disease is. I know that is, if you plant Arkansas Black, you should use a spur type from Stark Brothers, because they are more productive than the regular Arkansas Black. I think I will cut that down to a stump, and I have a bunch of rare Arkansas apple origin apples. And I'll probably graft several other Arkansas varieties onto that stump. Well, I don't know what this is, but I see it. When was that planted? 2008. That's long enough to wait for it to produce. Now here's old Kiefer pear. That Kiefer is your old hard traditional cannon pear, and that's what you see all over the southeast. Yeah. Because Kiefer is the only pear tough enough against fire blight to live to be an old age. So all the others were more susceptible to fire blight, and that's why you see only Kiefer. Except this one from Duck Hill, Mississippi called Leona pear. Now Leona is a big round, soft eating European pear. It's not gritty like the old hard Kiefers. Now it's from an old tree, and so if it's an old tree and still alive, it's proven itself against fire blight, you know. So Leona is vastly superior. Kiefer actually gets a fair dose of fire blight, but the limbs kind of compartmentalize it, and you see it only spreads to the tips.
And then it goes.
And then it goes. But my Orient pear is a better quality all-around pear for canning and eating than the Kiefer, and tougher against fire blight. So Kiefer, honestly, most of my pears are good fresh-eating pears, but people in Mississippi think of pear, when they say pear, they automatically think of Kiefer pears, and they think it's for canning. And there's a fair demand for the old canning pears. So I grow a good number of Kiefers just because people demand them. Yeah. It's actually, by my standards, a pretty low quality pear.
Is that a fig tree?
Yeah, these are my fig trees. This is my fig collection. You can see I've got them south of the high tunnel, hoping they'll get a little protection.
You got a flying dragon
I've got a flying dragon in the ground.
With a Christmas
ball. You see it's leafing out. I took them to some selling events around Christmas in Hernando, and advertised it as a Grinch's Christmas tree or a mother-in-law's Christmas tree. And people laughed and they talked about it. They didn't really buy many. So I was trying to sell them at Christmas. Everywhere I go, nearly all say I'll take at least one flying dragon and sit it out on the middle of the table. And I spend more time talking about that darn tree than anything else I grow. But I don't always sell a lot. People want to talk about that. I don't sell a lot because not everybody wants a horrifically thorny tree in their yard. Yeah. But see, that to me, that is rootstock for
it is
citrus.
Yeah.
And I'll grow them, but I can, if I don't, what I don't sell this year as specimen plants, I will
graft over.
I'll just graft over it, and it will citrus graft on it. It will make it more dwarfing, and the limbs will be more recumbent too. I've seen them side by side with straight trifoliates, but it's an interesting looking tree. There's some market for them. I will go to 2 weeks. I'll go to the Memphis Master Gardeners plant sale, and they will buy my flying dragon trifoliates. They will love it. I'll take lots.
Celeste, that's one of the standards.
Celeste, yeah. What they call Celeste in Louisiana looks exactly like what we call brown turkey in Mississippi. But you can see, I cut this sign, most of my figs, I sell so many figs as fast as I can grow them. I cut these, my cuttings, I take those in, say early December before they get hit by a frost, because figs are all cold sensitive and they die back. And you can see a good bit of dead growth. But I took a whole lot of cuttings. I got a refrigerator full of them, and because I'm trying to get them before they die. And most of my figs, you see, are stripped down to nothing. I've taken a lot of good cuttings off because I need them to propagate more.
Now, as a sidebar, I'm going to cut this part out.
And I've learned it, and I'm prepping my figs now to sell. I'll take them back this week when I go to Coldwater to start selling them next weekend.
We just put 64 variety in the ground last week.
Do you have any cuttings? I'd like some if you got any good rare ones.
I don't, because all my trees are small right now.
Yep. Mine too. But you see, I literally stripped it. I started off like in April propagating these things, rooting all the cuttings, and sold that batch out and did like some early summer and some mid-summer cuttings. And I got one called, I like O'Rourke's, that LSU O'Rourke's.
Yep.
And I got one from a friend in Arizona called Nancy's. There's O'Rourke.
I have an O'Rourke, and Dr. O'Rourke cut the limb off and handed it to my friend.
Oh, that's cool.
He got the tree, then he gave me a cutting off of his tree. So
I want some more. Now, O'Rourke, you know, do you know Alan Owens? He retired from LSU, and he's the main horticulturist at that big Bracey's nursery now.
Okay.
But he and Dr. Ed O'Rourke were contemporaries and buddies.
Yep.
So I noticed the last couple of years, I'm seeing a lot of O'Rourke's for sale commercially, and LSU Gold and several others. That is Dr. Owens promoting his buddy's figs that he spent all his life developing. He's in control of what Bracey's grows, so he is getting more and more of them spread around. That's all him.
LSU used to host a fig days out at their experimental orchard, and I went to that one time.
I'd love to go there. I want cuttings, and Dr. Allen has, Dr. Owens has promised me. He just forgot. He promised me that he could send me most of the O'Rourke figs. That's what I want. I want all the O'Rourke figs.
My O'Rourke died all the way to the ground this year.
But he's just forgot. Well, you see, now, this is why I take cuttings in December before it dies back, because we had 2 cold spells. That last bad cold spell we had, the temperature dropped 50 degrees in one day.
That one's dead too.
And that is what kills them.
Yeah.
That is that sudden drop in temperature.
But your root ball is well protected.
It should be.
Back.
And see, it's getting mature.
There it is right there.
Yeah. It's getting mature. But I literally keep these things, my goodness, stripped down to nothing. And I've got so many of these unlabeled figs. These are all rare, uncommon varieties, but I've lost the label. So I need to buy a bunch of it. And I had to, there's a Nancy's from Arizona. Don't know what it is, but it's one of my favorite tasting. But you see, that has died back here. I cut these back pretty hard. It was a pretty big bush.
Every tree that I had in the ground died to the ground this year, except Chicago Hardy. Chicago Hardy already has new growth on all the branches. I
did not know that. Now, they brag about it being more cold hardy. I doubted that it was, but you're saying that it is definitely.
It's the only one that did not die to the ground.
That's good. No, I've got a
and it's a good fig too.
I've got a good sized bag of Chicago Hardy from Atlanta, so I will try to get those. I've been propagating them. I got a friend with a big bush in Atlanta. She's sending me that and pomegranate.
LSU Gold. I don't have that one, but I'm going to be adding it to my orchard.
That's another one. You can find that at nursery.
Yep.
I got a big one at the house in Coldwater. I actually bought a potted one just to grow and that I could harvest more cinewood, because that one's not thriving there. It may be pretty young, but several of these. I wish I had not lost the labels on my others. Now there's a straight trifoliate growing right there. I planted it by that ditch because I wanted it out of the way. I actually harvest the fruit. My flying dragon comes from seed from a guy in Louisiana. I've forgotten his name, but when you plant seed from trifolia, you never know. About 9 out of 10 will be straight trifoliate, and just a few of them will have that downward curve thing. But he says his bush is like 95% true to flying dragon. So my flying dragons mostly come from here.
There's so many variations of sour orange that you don't really know what you get whenever you get it like that.
Angelique. Angelique was one of Thomas Jefferson's favorite fig. He liked Angelique and he liked White Marseille. And I had a buddy that was worked at Monticello, Thomas Jefferson, something. He took cuttings of his Angelique tree. So I actually have Thomas Jefferson's fig. I like the Angelique. It has a big crop of flesh-colored fruit, medium to big flesh-colored fruit. It has a big crop at a young age. So that is another one of my favorite figs. And you see, this was a big bush, and I'd cut it and cut it and cut it just to get those cuttings to propagate more. I can't get enough of those.
Yeah.
I've got one of these is a Traveler's Rest fig from Traveler's Rest, South Carolina, and I can sell an unlimited amount up in that area from upstate South Carolina. And that's another one. I strip them down for nothing because I'm propagating. This is a crop. Here's my Traveler's Rest. I like the figs. I hope it has figs and I'll eat them. I probably won't have enough stuff, but it's actual crop, a harvestable crop. This cuttings that I'll propagate more trees from. Yeah. There's a Ronde de Bordeaux. That's a small to medium solid black fig. That's a pretty good one.
That's a good one.
And a
that's
good grower.
Good dark fig if you want to add a dark fig variety. That one does
I need more rare figs. Figs sell just about unlimited.
Especially if you're selling something that nobody else has got.
Yeah, people want figs. If you got rare ones, that's even better. But they'll buy even unlabeled figs. I've sold unlabeled figs, the ones I lost tax from at a cheap price. But this year, I actually already started. I'm grafting some figs, which I never have bothered to graft figs before. I don't know why. People in Texas graft figs. Nobody else does. We root them instead. But if I've got a young fig and I've lost a tag, I might as well look at it as rootstock, and I'll graft a known variety on there and keep the label on it this time.
The bad thing about it is if it ever dies to the ground, it's going to come back as the rootstock.
That is a bad thing, and that is the advantage of rooting stuff. I would honestly like to have most of these heirloom fruit on their own roots. Apples and pears, I would like to have them on their own root. And I try that sometimes. And everywhere you read planting instructions, they'll tell you to plant it with a graft union above ground. But I am careless about that. I will plant an heirloom apple with a graft union underground and hope it will form its own roots. So,
and then it'll go.
And then it will go.
If you get a full-size tree, you know that was on dwarfing rootstock, then you know that graft union has set roots. And
well, I'm using typically a full-size seedling anyway, so it's no advantage to the rootstock. You know, so why, you know, I'm careless about planting with a graft union underground, which you're not going to hear that advice often.
Right.
But figs, not figs, but citrus, it's a big thing on the Gulf Coast, because even on the Gulf Coast in Florida, once every decade, they'll get a killing event that kills all the citrus to the ground. So citrus growers on the Gulf Coast are growing more and more on rooted citrus. And some citrus will root pretty easily. Some of it won't. It has to be grafted or budded. But I've got some in the greenhouse. I've got some citrus that are rooted, forming roots. And that's the same thing as figs. So if you get a cold event and kills it down, it'll resprout true from the roots. So on-rooted citrus would be a valuable thing to me if I can root it.
So back here you got more apples.
Yeah, and you see my pots. I love these Anderson pots.
Yep.
And that is a root pruning type pot. It's not only small and efficient sized pots. See, I can cram a bunch of these together in my high tunnel, and I can transport a bunch of them. But at a sale, see, a customer can pick one of these up and tote it off themselves. Well, if I have it in a 3-gallon pot, I'll have to tote it for the car for them and cram it in their compact car. They can take a lot of these. So this is
what size pot is that?
That is a 5 by 12, and that is more of them I'll do in these 4 by 10 pot. And besides being compact and efficient, they use a pretty small amount of dirt. It is a root pruning type pot. See, that's open like that. That keeps it from forming one long tap root in there, like many trees try to do. And it'll give you a fine mass of feeder roots instead of 1 or 2 big tap roots. And I like that for the advantage. I'm getting the actual superior root system from that.
Okay.
So I like the root pruning type stuff, especially on things like pawpaws or persimmons that try to form one long tap root. This will keep it from it.
I reached out to you last year asking you what pot, and you said the Anderson.
That's it.
Yep.
These things cost me about they're about 55 cents a piece. If you're in Oregon, they're about $1.10 what I paid for these last year with shipping. So shipping doubles the price on them. I like them enough that I keep wanting to use them. It'll probably reach a time when I think it's a limit to how much I want to spend on a pot.
Yeah.
But so
cuts into your profit too.
Yeah, the doubles the price shipping them from the West Coast. I really like them. I see advantages in them, but I have to look at pot prices. But I like them. I've got a good many. I think enough for this year. But there's a multi-grafted apple tree. Different varieties. See, some of them didn't take.
Striped.
Some of them fell. Kate's July Striped from Spartanburg.
Winnett and Wanda Butzel.
Winnett John de Butzel. I can't. That's a Ukrainian or Polish apple, something like that.
Oh, okay.
I got friends, apple collector friends. Bless their hearts. They send me stuff from all over the world. There's a small chance that this Ukrainian or Polish apple will make it in Mississippi. There's no reason to think that it will. But they have it. They're eager to share a signwood for me. And if they go to trouble mailing me a stick, yeah, I'll graft it and try it out. And I wouldn't graft a bunch of them, but I'll graft a limb on there and evaluate it.
Maybe you'll run across one that does really well.
You do good too. You know, there's a lot of Russian and German apples that actually have a low chill limit, and some of them are quite good apples in this climate, and they'll cover a lot of climate. So you experiment. I wouldn't waste a lot of time with Winnett John de Butzel, but I'll try that limb and see how it does. I've got lots of them like that. Apple collectors get kind of crazy, and I have, and pear collectors too, and I have some that access that work some at the germplasm repositories in Corvallis and Cornell, and they have access stuff, and they send me some pretty wild varieties that you will have, and some of them will work in Mississippi. It takes a while. When I have a new odd apple variety like it takes a while to evaluate, because I have to graft that thing, and it'll probably be several years before I can evaluate the fruit and the growth habit and the disease resistance and stuff like that. So it's a long trial period to see if something's really suitable.
Yeah.
But I still do a bunch of wild stuff. I've got a cooler and a refrigerator full of weird apples nobody else ever heard of, but I got them. There's Arkansas Black, not particularly thriving. Arkansas Black is one of the heirloom apples you can buy. I mean, it's got quite a reputation for the quality of the fruit, so I will do a good many of them.
But you don't get it to fruit here.
That fruit's a little bit. That tree's not thriving. I don't know why. I planted just in my older orchard with more sun. I planted half a dozen Arkansas Black. Ark Black is one I'll plant for fruit production. It is a good one, and it's good in a lot of climates.
I'm not so sure that it would grow down where I'm at, though.
They are growing some Arkansas Blacks in Uganda for commercial fruit production. Arkansas Black, I tell you what, Arkansas Black, Hunch, and Morgan's Christmas from South Carolina those are apple varieties that seem to ignore the whole chill hour theory. And they seem to produce in Hawaii or Alaska, either one, Uganda, they don't care. Wherever they are, they'll set fruit at the right time. So, which is unusual.
Maybe I'll try it.
Well, Arkansas Black is worth trying even in Florida, because it just doesn't, you know, we have this little chill hour theory, which is only a human theory, and we don't really understand what makes fruit set or not set. We think we do, but we're not right. And then you think you have this thing, these apples need this many chill hours, and these other apples need more chill hours. And then you run into something like Arkansas Black or Hunch or Morgan's Christmas, and they don't seem to care. So humans don't understand how plants work. We only have little theories. Here's a Collie apple from Grenada, like I said, my number one tree.
This is a great looking tree.
Yeah, it doesn't get quite as much shade. And look here, this is what I cut off earlier this year.
Wow.
That's either voles or rabbits. They are tearing my apple bark up this year. I don't know which one is voles. If it's up high on a little stem, I blame it on a rabbit standing on the hind legs. And if it's low down, I'll blame it on a vole. And if you grab a tree and it just comes up your hand and all the roots eaten off, that is a vole on the ground. But see, now that's pruned approximately the right way.
Yeah, that's a good looking pruning. It's a good looking tree.
I pruned that pretty heavily.
And you said this is Collie?
Collie apple from Grenada, Mississippi.
Yep.
And the darn sapsuckers give you fits some years. I don't particularly like it. I've never had a tree die because of that. I don't like it much. I wish you'd not do that. But
yeah. What about this one? Is this Collie?
No, that is a Paducah apple from Kentucky, and I cannot find much information on Paducah, and all I can say is it comes from Kentucky. And that has borne fruit. That's probably 10 years old, and it's not bearing fruit.
If it's 10 years old, it's not really growing much either, huh?
No. Now see, these pines have grown in the last 10 years, and that cuts off some of the sun comes from east to west, so it gets some midday sun. It really like a little more morning sun. Paducah, I don't know if I'll graft any more this year. I'd grafted a handful of them the last 2 or 3 years for people that want it and know its reputation. But that's one of the more Appalachian type that I won't do too many more of.
All right, so Mr. Larry has taken us around and he's showed us a little bit of everything that he is growing. I hope you enjoyed the tour. Keep looking for our other videos. We're going to keep producing some more videos while we're here today, grafting, just a regular interview, along with this orchard tour that you just got through watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Remember, keep growing, keep building, and always keep adventuring. And together, we're Flomaton Famous. We'll see you next time.